So let's see how these principles apply when we talk about something like cloud seeding, which is an effort that's contributed a tremendous amount of rainfall in the form of, or precipitation in the form of snow to the state of Nevada. Here are a few questions. What conditions have to be met to produce snow? How are freezing nuclei introduced into cloud systems? Is this toxic? Are there toxic side effects to cloud seeding? Okay, in order for cloud seeding to work, several conditions have to be met. First, we have to have a humid air mass. It has to have water vapor in it, and it has to be cooled to the dew point temperature. This means that it's lacking one thing, which is condensation nuclei. Because condensation nuclei have to be present for droplets to form, and because raindrops or snowflakes have to have sufficient velocity to reach the ground before they evaporate, we have to introduce freezing nuclei to lead to ice crystal formation. And that's what cloud seeding is all about. For snowfall to form, we need water vapor plus a condensation nucleus, and the temperature has to be less than 0 degrees centigrade, and the air volume that we're working with, a layer in the atmosphere for example, has to be saturated. That means that the relative humidity has to be 100%. If we introduce a nucleus, a freezing nucleus, we'll get ice crystals, which can grow to become snow crystals, to have sufficient mass to escape the cloud in response to gravity. We can have snowfall. We can also have, if this is a ground surface elevation phenomena, we can also have the accumulation of ice crystals on surfaces at the Earth's surface. But in general, when we talk about snowfall formation, because of cloud seeding, we're talking about introducing a nucleus and then having the internal processes of the clouds accumulate ice crystals that become larger snow crystals that then have sufficient mass to escape the upward movement of air in the cloud and fall to the surface of the Earth. So cloud seeding is a project that was formerly managed by the Desert Research Institute. It augmented snowfall in selected regions of Nevada to increase the snowpack. They included Lake Tahoe, the Truckee River, the Carson River, the Walker River, the Upper Humboldt River, the South Fork of the Owyhee River, and the Reese River. They produced approximately 64,000 acre-feet per year. And that was at a cost of about $7 to $15 per acre-foot. So here's how it works. Natural freezing nuclei include dust, smoke, salt crystals, and soil particles. When those aren't present in sufficient amounts, we add them by burning silver iodide and salts in a volatile solvent and then injecting those directly into clouds, either from ground stations like the one pictured here or from airplanes. The silver iodide crystals create freezing nuclei for snow crystal formation, and because they're hygroscopic, which means that they attract water, they're even more effective than, say, dust, smoke, and salt crystals, or dust and smoke. The silver iodide crystals can be injected into clouds from the wings of airplanes. Here, for example, we see silver iodide flares mounted on the wing of an airplane. They can also be injected from ground stations, as you saw in one of the previous slides, simply touched off and allowed to directly enter the cloud from the soil surface. So there are certain criteria for initiating seeding. First of all, we have to have cloudiness of sufficient areal extent to cover at least 50% of the intended target area. We have to have clouds of sufficient depth with cloud bases at least as low as the highest mountain peaks. we need the winds to be blowing in a direction that will transport the seeded material over the target areas. So for distributing silver iodide, we want it to we want the wind to carry it into the carry the crystals into the target areas, so that we have nucleation and condensation occurring in the areas where we want the rainfall to eventually land. The wind speeds can't be very high. 30 meters per second is the upper threshold, and that's partly because this facilitates the growth of ice crystals. And the clouds must have supercooled liquid water, which means that in the vapor phase, they should be less than 0 degrees centigrade, just waiting for a seed crystal to appear to provide a freezing nucleus. The temperature near 10,000 feet should be less than 5 degrees centigrade. The question is often asked whether the silver iodide crystals in themselves are toxic. Well, silver salts are mildly toxic. There's no reported carcinogenic effect from ingestion of silver salts. And one of the things that happen when we make a massive amount of snow is that the concentrations in the snowpack are well below the limits at which we can detect the chemical. So in essence, even though we're using concentrated amounts to seed clouds to develop snow storms, the amounts that we're applying are very small compared with the amounts of water that later dilute the chemical to a point where it's undetectable in the snowpack. So back to the questions. What conditions have to be met to produce snow? Well, first, we have to have a supercooled air mass, about 5 degrees below freezing. We have to have a wind velocity less than 30 meters per second. We have to have sufficient moisture in a cloud to be so that the introduction of condensation nuclei is effective when we release them from a ground station or from the air. And we have to have enough of a cloud mass at an elevation of about 10,000 feet to have this be an effective procedure. The freezing nuclei are introduced into cloud systems by either sending them up into the atmosphere from ground stations, and these are located in the mountains, or by introducing them directly from planes, seeding them from flares that are mounted on the wings of the airplanes.